But right now we're going to have Julianna Silva, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Family Friendly New Mexico and is a native New Mexican committed to helping New Mexicans realize economic vitality through her work to support small business ownership policies that enable families to thrive. And she is a graduate of the UNM Anderson School of Management. She's going to be speaking on building a thriving law practice with family-friendly workplace policies. The Society of Human Resource Management estimates the average replacement cost of a salaried employee to be 6 to 9 months' salary. High turnover rates compound those costs to businesses. Firms that implement family-friendly workplace policies can benefit from an improved ability to recruit more qualified employees, increase retention with higher employee engagement and loyalty, and recognize higher profits from increased innovation and productivity. So this course outlines the types of family-friendly workplace policies, demonstrates the benefits of those policies, and features law practices sharing their best practice for implementing those policies. So please help me welcome Julianna Silva.
Oh, thank you. No worries. Thank you so much, Carolyn, and thanks to the State Bar for having Family Friendly New Mexico here with you today. I will say in my career as a business owner, a consultant, a trainer, I've done a lot of speaking and training, but this is my first live in-person speaking and that I've done since the beginning of COVID. So bear with me if I'm working through some technical difficulties or just riding that bike again. So it's so great to be with you all here this afternoon. How many of you are enjoying the balloons? I had some excitement because a balloon landed in our driveway this week. And I have a portal in my backyard, and as we saw it sort of drifting downward, I give a lot of kudos to the pilot who narrowly landed in my driveway strip. So that was my excitement for the week. So enjoy those balloons. Carolyn talked a little bit about me. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Family Friendly New Mexico, which I'll talk about and tell you about Family Friendly New Mexico in just a sec. But I am a business owner as well as a consultant who helps other business owners, and I work with nonprofits. Right now I'm working with Family Friendly New Mexico to really operationalize the support that we provide to employers who want to implement family-friendly workplace policies. So Family Friendly New Mexico is a nonprofit initiative. It was established in 2010. Our founder and CEO, Giovanna Rossi, at the time was putting together a task force on work-life balance. And this was a task force at the state level, and she convened a lot of stakeholders statewide to really help define what are family-friendly workplace policies. And from that task force, Family Friendly New Mexico emerged with a recognition program that I'll talk about in just a sec in 2015. So our mission is really to recognize and support employers who are implementing or who want to implement family-friendly workplace policies. And that mission is in service to our larger vision that every New Mexican have a good job and are able to care for themselves and their families so that our communities can thrive. So how we accomplish and work toward that large mission and vision, these slides I put in a little bit out of order, so I'll hop around. We really provide a lot of resource for employers. We have a really pretty small but mighty team. We offer a website with a lot of resource. We provide educational events. We speak at other educational events to really talk about what are the types of policies that could be implemented, what are the benefits of those policies, and what's the research that tells us that those policies are really helpful to higher employee engagement, which ultimately results in higher productivity, higher innovation, and bottom line return to employers across the state. So we spend a lot of time providing a lot of different types of resources. We have an online toolkit that really outlines a lot of the research that we have done and that we continue to do to really inform the workplace policies that we recognize in our award program. We have an online family-friendly business directory that was launched during COVID. We find that a lot of community members really want to support employers who offer these types of policies to their employees. So we have a family-friendly business directory that features our awardees, and they can share a lot of different types of information about the services that they offer as well through that directory. We launched our family-friendly workplace blog during COVID because we found that employers were really having to pivot and really understand some of the policies that we've been talking about for a really long time. Oh my gosh, I have to manage a remote workforce, like immediately. How do I do that? And what are the policies that I can implement to do that? So our workplace blog brings a lot of really topical information to help support employers who want to learn how to do that. Oh, I'm going to keep my own time. So as I said, if you'll all bear with me as I navigate speaking, this is helpful. So I'm just starting my timer. We have an annual awards luncheon that recognizes and celebrates employers who are offering these policies to their employees. So our Family Friendly Business Award is really like the flagship and vehicle for how we provide a framework of talking about family-friendly workplace policies. And the award recognizes 7 categories of policies. And within each of these categories, we provide a lot of research and reference on how to implement different types of policies that fall within the categories. So I don't necessarily have to read them out loud. I know you all can read. I'm going to talk a little bit more deeply about some of these policies. We have approximately 21 policies that we recognize in our Family Friendly Business Award program. I won't touch on all the policies, obviously. We only have an hour. But you can find all of this information on our website. At the end of these slides, which I believe is being distributed through PDF, you'll find our website and my direct email address and how to contact us and really get access to more of the information. So 7 policies. We did, the program was launched in 2015 recognizing 4 categories of policies, and in 2019 we added 3 more categories of policies to bring a higher level platinum recognition to employers who were implementing policies within this category. I want to also give a shout out to Bill Kramer because he was really awesome in supporting me being here today, and the AV folks, thank you so much as well. So we recognize different award levels in our program. And again, we aren't really all about the award, but this provides a really good framework that helps folks really wrap their arms around the different types of policies that they can implement in their business. So our entry level is the Bronze Award, and that really just recognizes employers who are on the pathway. They're either just learning about how to implement family-friendly workplace policies, or maybe they just have 1 or 2. Family Friendly New Mexico recognizes employers in any industry and of any size. So we have some employers who have 2 employees. We have large institutions that are recognized as family-friendly business awardees, like UNM and the city of Albuquerque, the state of New Mexico, who of course has hundreds of employees. And then we have silver, gold, and platinum. And our platinum level awardees really are employers who are going above and beyond and implementing policies that are really demonstrating commitment to employees in bringing their whole selves to work. So I think there are some lessons that have come out of the pandemic that we realize the need to really support the entire life of the employee, whether it's just within, it used to be within just the walls, right, of the business, but now it's they're at work, they're at home, they're in different places working. So we're really wanting to inform and help employers understand how to really provide policies that support the vitality of the employee in all aspects of their life. And I really want to recognize our current awardees who are law firms. Sutton, Thayer, and Brown is recognized at the platinum level. Too long, don't read, but our award year opens in October of every year. So we just opened our award year for 2022. So folks who apply now for the first time will get recognition as a family-friendly business, workplace business for 2021 and 2022. Sutton, Thayer, and Brown just renewed their application and was recognized again at the platinum level. And Tina Gooch, who works with Sutton, Thayer, and Brown, is on our Business Leadership Council, and so provides a lot of really great feedback and resource. Our Business Leadership Council provides this to us as we develop more resources and education and support for employers. So we're really grateful for that support. And then at the gold level, we have Atkinson and Kelsey, Giddens and Gatton Law, Pegasus Legal Services for Children, and Slingshot LLC. So shout out to folks who are being recognized. And if you own a firm or are in HR in a firm and want to be recognized for the policies that you implement, please visit our website. You can learn all about how to do that. It's pretty simple. It's an online application and doesn't take too long to fill out. So at Family Friendly New Mexico, we really make the case that family-friendly workplace policies are good for business. And of course, Carolyn read some of the statistics that we cite in our business case about the costs associated with losing employees. Employee engagement will help spur more innovation, more productivity, and creates a virtuous cycle of increased client satisfaction, increased customer satisfaction, which then really continues that benefit to the business itself. So we have research that talks about different studies that have been done. I'm going to talk about a couple of things today, some really good examples of practices that are finding some of that benefit back to them for implementing these policies. And I actually have, from some of our awardees, feedback about best practices, how they've implemented family-friendly workplace policies, and how it's affected them during COVID. One of the pieces of feedback that we got a lot from our business awardees is that by having the family-friendly workplace policies in place, they were more able to pivot and adjust during the pandemic. And we recognize this ourselves at Family Friendly New Mexico. As I said, we have a small but mighty team. We were mostly remote prior to the pandemic, but we were able to enable our non-remote employees to go fully remote. And we probably will stay that way for the foreseeable future. So we recognize that already having similar policies in place really helped us more seamlessly transition to being able to manage the continuous changes that we're all experiencing during the pandemic, right, at work. And I'll talk a little bit about what makes that really happen. So we really believe that law practices, and we're seeing it in our awardee pool, and firms have the opportunity to be a leader in New Mexico and our economic recovery. So it's really about how do we embrace new ways of working? How do we create a culture of fostering the vitality of the employee as a whole person, as I said, and how do we create that virtuous cycle of employee engagement, increased client satisfaction, and a thriving practice? So I'm going to talk about a few of the policies that some of our awardees in the law field have said have been really beneficial to them for recognizing either the ability to pivot during pandemic or the ability to just thrive even pre-pandemic when they had these policies in place. I want to just take a quick pause. I'm going to take a sip of water and just see, are there any questions? I'm happy to answer questions as we go along. I don't have to wait until the end to answer questions, but I'm happy to do that. So just a quick pause for those folks online. Perfect. Okay, so flexible scheduling. Of course, we all know how important this has been during the pandemic. Lots of studies I'm sure that you all have run across that talk about the Great Resignation. And, sorry, I'm just, okay, this is, normally, this is like, I can do this, but this is my coming back into speaking. It's back to talking about flexible scheduling. This has been one of the key policies that many of our firms have talked about being really beneficial to having in place during the pandemic. Is my mic okay? It sounded like it got a little loud. One of the studies and some of the information informally coming back to us is the number of women in law that have had to leave the workplace because they're having to make the choice between managing their children's education. We all know what happened when during COVID folks were having to have a classroom in their living room and an office in their dining room, and what has that prompted for your profession? And unfortunately, there has been research showing that so many women have exited the workforce, and in particular in law, that number is fairly high. I just heard a story on Marketplace that we had pretty low numbers this morning, if you all listened to the number of jobs that were created, but the number of women, the percentage of women in those job returning to work is really, really low. So, what happens when we don't have the diversity of employees in our businesses? Again, research shows that productivity and innovation can really suffer when we're not really bringing in lots of diverse lived experience into our businesses. So flexible scheduling can be done in lots of different ways. We have sample policies that we can help folks think through. Where do you start with flexible scheduling? How do you manage a remote workforce so that you can really try to work toward maintaining that employee engagement? And I'll share some just really feedback from our awardees about what they've done with flexible scheduling in the recent months. Support with childcare. So I only got to listen to a little bit of the previous presentation, and for those of you that were here, I found the design sprint that they were conducting was really fascinating about childcare access and how it is interwoven with the law. And so we are seeing that, again, the choices that employees are having to make because they're having to manage children at home, or really that shift that's happened during the pandemic, support with childcare is really important. And I did make a note that someone online was talking about, it can be a regulatory heavy lift to providing childcare, especially in a business. But I will just say we did have an awardee, it's a bank institution that really recognized that many of their employees during the pandemic were having to leave their jobs. And the HR manager was having conversations with employees who were sitting in her office in tears because they had to make the choice. It's either my husband has to quit or I have to quit in order to manage my child's education. So what this institution did was they did spin up an on-site childcare program that would allow their employees to remain in place in their jobs, and they carried that through the pandemic until the banks were able to open again. And they did it thoughtfully and intentionally, but fairly quickly. And so this is another recommendation is about how to create an agile business, right? To be able to respond to trends in employment and the workplace and the marketplace to continue thriving as a business, because the business does have to thrive in order to provide a thriving environment for their employees. So I thought that was a really great example. They're not operating the child care center now, but they're ready to spin it up if in case this were to happen again in the near future. Paid leave. So of course, having access to taking time off to care for your family or for yourself. I won't go over all of the rules and requirements of paid leave that are happening. We have the Healthy Workplaces Act that's going into effect July 2022. All the different coronavirus related paid leave. But these policies we've been recommending and have had in place in our program pre-pandemic. So we find that paid leave is a real game changer for employees in feeling comfortable being able to take care of themselves and their families and then show up fully engaged at work when they're back in the office. So another piece that we find that I will talk about as a recommendation is many firms, many businesses may already have paid leave in place, but are people really taking the paid leave? That's related to the culture of the organization. So really the recommendation that we make is if you have your paid leave policies in place, number one, be sure to communicate that, but also managers should be taking paid leave as well, so that they are modeling for their employees to foster the well-being of everyone involved. And then well-being, this comes to health and wellness programs. So this is really a new, it's not new, but I'm hearing more about health and wellness programs. In fact, I saw on the State Bar website there's a wellness program for attorneys, which I thought was really, really great. I think the future of work is going to be looking at the well-being of employees, and the well-being of employees is not just related to their physical health, but it's also related to their mental and their spiritual and their emotional health. So many more employers are really looking at how to integrate programs that really celebrate the well-being and foster the well-being of their employees. So this is a policy that we do recognize in our program. I'll take another quick pause.
Questions online. As the pandemic continues to regress, do you think remote work should and will continue to be encouraged?
That's a really excellent question. So as the pandemic recedes, I just want to make sure I'm hearing correctly, will hybrid work or remote work continue to be part of?
That is correct.
Yep. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, but absolutely. And so I will get to that. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah. What are the lessons and what do you suggest we implement in our companies or to our clients?
I think it's referring to the policies that you are referring to, but I think she was just trying to get some clarification on that.
Some more detail on that. Okay. So each of these categories and policies that I'm talking about, we have a lot of detail about that on our website, and we have sample policies and toolkits that can really inform the different types of policies that can be implemented. And I will say one of the other benefits that we offer, or it's really, benefit makes it sound like we're a membership organization, which we aren't. But one of the things that we offer is family friendly. Even with a small and mighty team, we have access to HR professionals in community that can really support employers to tailor or better understand how to implement these policies in their specific company. Because there are companies at different sizes, different capacities, and so we really do bring resources to our community to be able to access that. So one other thing that we think is really important, we saw this really come up during the pandemic, and I'm continuing to read about it, is how employees can contribute to their own well-being while juggling work at home. So I thought this was interesting. I found a new term that I'm contemplating. An article from the Harvard Business Review, October 13th, 2020, the post-pandemic rules of talent management. So one of the terms that they talked about, Manpower Group global analysis showed that 8 in 10 workers want more remote work. So back to that question, to attain a healthier work-life fusion. So our CEO and founder, Giovanna Rossi, talks a lot about there really isn't a work-life balance. So if you think about balance and scales, the scales are sort of always moving, right? But Giovanna has really wanted to talk more about work-life integration. And so I think this next level term is work-life fusion that we see happening right now with pandemic. And as the question from the audience online, is this a trend that's going to follow into the future? And yes, many studies are showing that employees are really wanting that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. But how can employees themselves, or if you are an employee working for a firm, how can you manage your own well-being, and how do you manage that work-life integration, right? When your office is in your dining room, what is it that you can do to be sure to foster your own well-being? So, taking breaks, maintaining practices and routines are really important to do that. Be sure to get your social needs met. I mean, now at least we're in front of each other now, right? IRL, we're not just on a screen online. But as things shift and change, we never know, it's important to maintain those connections. And using technology to maintain the connections can also be something that firms and employees can continue to do. And of course, if your employer offers employee assistance programs, really seek out the mental health, the coaching support, stay physically active, and of course, as best possible, maintain all of those health appointments. Especially now that we're coming out of pandemic, those things are getting a little easier to do. But the employees, we really, it's not just on the employer to encourage the well-being, it's really important for employees to own their own well-being as well, and continue talking to your employer, whether it's HR or owner or partner, about what programs are available to support that. So if you are a firm or a business owner, what can you do? Back to the question of how can we implement workplace policies? So we believe at Family Friendly New Mexico, our primary audience that we speak to are business owners. We do provide, resource for employees to understand more about family-friendly workplace policies, and we have research that employees can use to build a business case within your own business or firm to talk to leadership about implementing family-friendly workplace policies. But we start with the employer, and we really want to recognize and celebrate employers who are already implementing these policies or who are interested in adding to their policies. So we say, we are going to meet you exactly where you are right now. And so we'll start from there and help you offer care. So I like acronyms, they're easy to remember. Again, what policies do you currently have in place? It's really important to communicate those policies to your employees and do it on a regular basis. There's so much information coming at us these days, and even more so in the pandemic. Everything is sort of constantly changing, and we have to keep up with a lot. So it's really important to continue to communicate with your employees about the policies and the ways that you can support them to show up in their best way at work. And another piece of information that we found at Family Friendly really supported our ability to take this team remote completely 100% was assess your IT. So this is a place where businesses are going to have to step up and maybe improve their IT, upgrade their IT. We're all unfortunately way too familiar with all the cybersecurity risks that are happening. They've been happening for a really long time, but they've ratcheted up in recent months. And so really assessing and investing in IT is important, because IT can help you keep your employees engaged and keep them really productive. So at Family Friendly New Mexico, we had already in our plans to implement a project management system and a CRM, customer relationship management system. Well, during the pandemic, we had to act much more quickly. We're a pretty small nonprofit initiative, but we were able to find IT and software that helped us in a low-cost way to implement both of those systems right away. And they weren't perfect out the gate, but we started from where we were, and we just continue to refine and refine and refine. Reimagine productivity metrics. So we have been acculturated into what some may call the industrial 40-hour work week, 8 hours a day, 5 hours, 5 days a week, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. How can we really reassess our productivity outputs, and instead of focusing on hours worked, look at what the actual outcomes are? So that's a really important, sometimes shift in leadership thinking that we have to make in order to really position ourselves to be ready for the next phase. The other term that came from this article from HBR was the new next, right? We're, again, constantly having to keep up with the shifting trends and everything that's happening in our environment to stay productive and support the health and well-being of businesses and our employees. So again, I mentioned embrace agility. There are sometimes, jokes about certain professions that are old school. Well, none of the professions, none of the industries anymore can really afford to stay tied to how we did things in the past. So it's not any longer how do we get back to normal, but what is the new normal? What is the new next? Another sort of saying that I just heard yesterday in a podcast was a definition for leadership. And the definition that this person was proposing is leadership should be an argument with the past. So if you're not arguing with how things have always been done, at least to investigate and get curious, do your own design sprints within your organizations, then are you leading into the future? So I really appreciated that view of leadership. And evaluate as you go. Not everything you implement is going to be 100% successful. So it's really important to evaluate what the impact has been and really think about whether you need to adjust or scrap something that you tried. We tried one project management software, realized it wasn't for us, and quickly moved to another one that we now are using on a daily basis. So embrace agility and continuously evaluate the systems and the processes that you put in place to support your employees and your business. Questions? As I pause before I move to the next part of the presentation. Yes, okay. I'll take you and then you.
On the previous slide and looking at the reimagined productivity metrics, when you do have hourly employees, what might that look like? Or is it just we're not keeping track of hours, we're keeping track of tasks or what productivity, I guess is how it says it. But like I'm in state government where we have hourly employees.
Right.
So this may be very difficult to do, but it makes a lot of sense.
It can be really difficult to do, and I think one thing I did love about the design sprint, I have actually done a lot of design thinking processes, is we have rules, we have regulations, you've got classifications of employees, hourly, and so it's about how do you accommodate within your structure. State government might have a lot more structure that they have to follow, but I would give an example of, let's say you have an hourly employee and they're a 40-hour-a-week employee, and are you going to watch 15-minute increments? Are you watching in 20-minute increments? This kind of speaks to culture of management and culture of the department, culture of the organization. You do have a lot of regulations in state government, but instead of solely focusing on, because if you have a 40-hour-a-week employee, you can't say, sure, you can work 20 hours if you get all your work done, right? I mean, there has to be some flexibility in there and some agreement and norm that that might be expected. But even a slight shift in, because every employee is also different in how they perform, right? So it's a filter through a lot of the practices. So you have policies and then you have practices. So really thinking strategically about the culture of how people are managed, I think is important. And I think we're going to see a big shift coming in the future of work about how to redefine those metrics. So I'm not giving you a hard and fast answer because I don't mean to make this joke, but you go to see an attorney and you say, here's my problem, and what's the answer? Well, it depends, right? So it really does depend on the culture of the department, the manager, but I think leadership can be given resources to understand how to manage more toward output and support of the employee as opposed to, tracking exact minute measurements. Okay, did you have a question?
I was curious what a professional approach is to compensation changes for people working remotely, and if they should be considered at all in equity.
I'm going to give you that answer again, and it depends. I know that a lot of large companies, especially tech companies, are really looking at, so you want to be able to be remote and work from anywhere. Well, the cost of living in Albuquerque is dramatically different than the cost of living in San Francisco, so we're going to adjust your salary. Again, I think it's about starting from where you are and what makes the most sense for your organization or your business. So what does that mean? And this goes a little bit back to your question about what are the metrics? Well, the business or the organization or the department has to really understand what is our ultimate goal? What are our quote unquote metrics that we're working toward? And how do we fit supporting employees show up as their best selves into reaching those goals? So I think it's important to really know your business, whether it's a business or a practice or a department, to really understand what is the ultimate goal we're working toward and how do we map that out. I had another thought that'll come to me about salary differentials. We're going to be writing a blog post about the owner of a company, I believe out of San Francisco, the Bay Area, called Gravity Payments. And so this is an online payment processor. And the CEO, about 7 or 8 years ago, took a massive pay cut to pay himself. He paid everyone in the company the same salary, including himself. So everyone started making $75,000 a year. And that case study alone, we'll be writing a blog post about it, but it talks about the productivity and the bottom line impact that he saw in doing that. It's a huge shift, right, in thinking, in practice, in culture. And so these are the new next ways of being in business that we're going to be seeing, I think, become more of a norm. Okay, other questions or online? Yes?
How do software tools like project management facilitate a family-friendly workplace?
That's a really great question. So I can speak from experience. One of the tools that we have implemented, and I'm not endorsing it in any way, but it's called Asana, and it's a good project management tool for our team. And one of the things that it helped is actually in our communication, and it really helped enable employees to feel like if they're, we're a team of like 5, so we don't have a huge hierarchical structure, but we have a little bit of hierarchy in our team. And so if I'm the CEO, I have a project manager, a project coordinator who's fabulous, Angelica, and if her mom, who is an attorney, is online, going to give a shout out. But this enabled us, she's actually an hourly employee, and it enabled me to always understand where she was in projects and where I could support her as her manager to feel like she was able to keep reaching toward her goals. And so Asana, a project management software, helped us to do that because she's remote work. So this is a place where IT, technology, is supporting our remote work policy. Does that answer the question? I know it's an online, so. Any other questions? Yes?
What are your thoughts on hybrid work and collaborative on-site work?
Yes, good question. So this is a trend that we are seeing more and more. And again, it goes back to, I can speak from experience on this too. I used to work at a nonprofit that provided a lot of business consulting and training. It's called West, and we had a remote worker. It's a statewide organization with offices statewide, and we would come together virtually, even before pandemic, of course, because this was a while back, and have online meetings, mostly through telephone, which is not ideal. And we, in our Albuquerque office, had one remote worker, and she was working out of Arizona. And the way that the hybrid worked then was she'd be on I think it's called a telcom, or I can't remember what that device is that you put in the center of a room and people are on the phone, right? Well, invariably, and you'll understand this, you had 12 people in a room, they're all seeing each other, they're doing visual cues, they're talking to each other, and what happens with the telecom piece? It just gets ignored, right? And so, or many people are talking at once. When you're live and in person, you can kind of handle that, right? If there's a conversation going on over here, you might and I might be having a side conversation, but she couldn't track any of that happening. So this made her feel completely excluded, which one of our other policies that I probably won't have time to get to today, or categories, is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is a really interesting topic to talk about, because in hybrid work and in person, we now are being able to use technology to equalize that problem that happened with my remote worker a few years ago. Now everyone's in a square, and the interesting thing about everyone being in a square is that it equalizes how people show up in virtual spaces. Everyone has the same size square, right? So in person, that's a little bit different. You can talk about power differentials very differently online than you do when you have meetings in person. So again, I think it's about having intentional procedures and habits and culture around how do we accommodate folks who are on the screen, just as we're doing right here, and folks that are in person. So really, I think much of this comes down to communication with leadership, communication with employees, and consistent communication about what works and what doesn't work. So I think that we're only going to see continuous hybrid work environments happening. And there's another case study that HBR had talking about a firm in San Francisco that, again, pre-pandemic, they were paying exorbitant rates for rent in the city, right? And so they wanted to figure out, how can we lower this line item cost on our budget? So they started experimenting with remote work. And what they found was their productivity increased, and yet they had to be really intentional about how they pulled the firm together to have conversations, to have water cooler conversations, to have those pass-by conversations in the hallway that really can inform your work. So they were very intentional about how they did it. They did this as an experiment. They poised themselves, little did they know, that that would be how they would have to work. And so now, post-pandemic, that same firm, I learned a new term called big law. I didn't realize that was the term. But of course, they're a big law firm. But now, post-pandemic, they have let their lease go on their really high rent rates. And now they are leasing smaller offices where employees who, they're doing a study about where are employees living, what parts of the city. So they're employing like co-working spaces or hot seats in those areas so that employees can come together in those spaces while still remaining mostly remote. So I found that study really interesting. Okay, any other questions? I'm coming to the end of our presentation. I just want to check my little highlights here, make sure I didn't. So out of this HBR article about the post-pandemic rules of talent management, I just thought this was an interesting piece, and this is by Becky Frankowitz and I want to make sure I get his name right, Tomas Chomaro Premuzic of Manpower Group. So what they said is it's time to unleash these new ways of working for the long term, with the focus on well-being, equality, and productivity that can work for both employers and employees long after the crisis ends. So I just find that that's really, it's really great to consider as we move into this next version of what we're going to be doing as businesses and our work environments. So I just want to take a few minutes to share with you what some of our actual awardees are saying about their family-friendly practices. This first slide comes, I believe, from Sutton Thayer and Brown. Our attorneys and staff know that we are here for them in time of need and work with them to ensure that they have what they need without the fear of losing their job when a family need arises. So fear of losing a job is another thing that we're finding with employees. And of course, going back to that financial institution that I talked about, who had just, employee after employee after employee crying in front of her desk saying, I'm going to have to quit my job. This employer was able to be agile and to respond to that need, which wasn't, of course, just for that employee. It was for many employees across the organization. So again, really that fear of losing a job is key, and Sutton, Thayer, and Brown was able to really listen to what their employees needed and help in that way. They had positive experience already having those family-friendly workplace policies in place prior to COVID. And some of their recommendations, again, is talk with employees to understand what it is they need and be flexible enough to make that happen to the best extent possible within your own boundaries. But again, back to that leadership quote, if you're not arguing with the past, are you really leading into the future? So you may have policies in place, but that doesn't mean policies can't change or be improved. And organize efforts to help with workload. So Sutton, Thayer, Brown was able to look at how can they bring teams of people together to help with workload in case somebody needed to be out. Another firm, recognizes how much everyone is juggling right now. So managers, owners, employees, we're all juggling a lot. So really listening, coming from empathy, and really we talk a lot at Family Friendly about leaders being vulnerable. You're dealing with your own juggling in your life, right, as a leader or a manager. So it's important to recognize that we can all start from the same place and work together to come up with solutions on how to be flexible and how to support health and well-being of everyone involved. And again, it's really about looking at the culture of the organization. Having a family-friendly workplace is about the culture of the organization. And there are lots of folks in town that do this work, helping people look at their culture, question the culture. How are we working? I know we all are keeping up with a lot, and sometimes it's about building the plane while you're flying. So if your culture needs a look, then take some time to take a look at the culture. And then again, it's not enough just to say that you have the policy. It's really important to communicate the policy and model the policy, encourage managers, principals, owners to model the policies that they want their employees to also engage with. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any other questions.
Yes, we have another one. What are your thoughts on the unpaid commute time and parking issues that we face with people working not remotely but in-house?
Say that again, please.
What are your thoughts on unpaid commute time and parking issues with face-to-face now and into the future?
That's a really good question. I will be fully transparent and say I haven't formed any cogent thoughts that I could share, but I know there are a lot of studies that are showing from the other side of the coin, employers really being able to save on some of these lost hours in commute time. And so it's something, again, if you're in a firm or an organization, or you're a leader or owner in a firm or organization, what's the argument with the past about that? This is a new thing that's been presented, has emerged from this shift in how we work. So what do we need to look at in order to accommodate that? Should there be, some sort of differential in compensation, or how can we be creative about it? So sorry, that's not quite the answer, but yeah. Okay. Well, I want to thank you all so much. Enjoy your awards, and I want to thank the State Bar again. I want to thank Bill and AV for helping, and again, contact information. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to support you.
Thanks.